Welcome to the Society Pod, a podcast for entrepreneurs, marketers, and leaders. Here's your host, Jessica Yarmy.
Hey there, everybody. Welcome to this week's episode of the Society Pod. My guest today is trailblazing in the realm of athletics and creating safe spaces for athletes to play the sports that they know and they love. He's a professional athlete himself, and he's taking that experience to really build a foundation of his new entrepreneurial venture, Players Health. Welcome to the show, Tyrre Burks.
Thank you. I really appreciate it, Jessica. Thanks for having me.
You are involved in so many different things and so many aspects of Players Health. How do you introduce yourself?
I always introduce myself more. I'm a servant leader of Players Health. I'm more of an evangelist for our mission, what we're about. I want to embody the mission as a whole. Everything from sales to people. I'm just a servant for the organization and the evangelist for what we do and how we go about doing it.
So you've been doing this Players Health build for 10 years now. Where did this idea stem from?
We've been at it for 10 years. It's crazy. Time flies. You start a career thinking you're going to do one thing and it completely morphs into something that you would never imagine. And that's what happened to me. I grew up on the south side of Chicago. Sports was a really big part of my life. Think about all the things you could get into when you were growing up in that area. Sports was a safe place. That was really something I gravitated towards. I had an opportunity to play college. I played professionally. And then when I decided to start thinking about what I was going to do next, I started thinking about my youth sports experience and all of the things that led to me ending my career early. I had 3 bulging discs in my neck. I tore my hamstrings, broken fingers. There was a bunch of injuries. But the foundation was, hey, had these injuries would have been managed a lot better, shoulda, coulda, woulda, I probably played longer. I hung it up at 24. I started thinking about all of the ways in which we can focus on creating safe spaces for athletes to play sports. Injuries were the beginning. At the same time, the USA Gymnastics, the Penn States, all of those national news issues, I just got tired of seeing the news articles. My focus was really around, how do we go about creating safe spaces for these athletes? We drop our kids off at sports assuming that they're safe, and then they have these experiences that dramatically change their lives. And so our focus has been, how do we go about doing that? We started with injuries, abuse prevention, staff compliance, governance, all of those things. And then the insurance piece came afterwards. So the mission has been kind of the common thread throughout the life of the company.
You almost have, I would think of it like an ecosystem almost. You started with the youth athletics, but you have a lot of resources for youth athletic programs. And now you're kind of like in the insurance land. And then you and I crisscrossed because you're in the boutique space a little bit. If someone's brand new to learning about Players Health, what are all the different aspects of your business and how do they Venn diagram together?
I break up what we do in 3 phases. What we do really well is we provide visibility of risk to our client. And those clients could be youth and amateur sports organizations. They could be fitness clubs. They could be college and professional organizations. We give them visibility of their risk and we give them tools to manage and mitigate that risk. That could be background check platform. There could be compliance. There could be an injury reporting platform. All of the services we provide help them understand their risk and then helps them manage it. And lastly, once you understand your risk, you got visibility of it. Now you know what insurance you need, and then we're there to provide insurance for them. And so it's really that progression of risk management that we're providing that ultimately lands them to understand how much insurance coverage they need, why they need it, and what they're trying to protect themselves for.
And so as you're providing visibility, do you batch your core customer into 3 buckets as well? Or how do you define who your core customer is?
There are basically 4 core customers of Players Health. We started with youth and amateur sports. So think of your youth soccer club, your Pop Warner, your Little League. There are over 400,000 youth and amateur sports organizations playing sports with over 60 million athletes every year. Very few people know that there's over $3 billion of insurance premium produced in just youth and amateur sports. And then you have fitness. Fitness is also a massive industry in that we support boutique fitness clubs like your Orange Theories, your Anytime Fitness, your Punch, your F45. We focus on franchisee ran organizations. So we're not writing your lifetimes, but we are writing the smaller boutique clubs. Then we do college, which we do all of the NIL contracts. So most people may not know, but college athletes can get paid. Name, image, and likeness is something that was launched 4 years ago now. Over $2 billion of contracts are now being issued in collegiate sports right now. And now organizations need to protect that risk. And then we all know that pro athletes are signing multi-million-dollar contracts, and we're ensuring the injury risk for the team and for the athletes on that front. So it's literally youth to pro. We started specifically just focusing on youth and amateur sports.
So you started in youth and amateur sports, and then it's just evolved over the last 10 years. And you just mentioned Orange Theory, which is one of the biggest names in fitness. And obviously, a lot of my world overlaps into fitness. Give me the background on how that deal came to be. How long ago was it? And what services are you providing Orange Theory that might be interesting to someone who's listening to this?
It's a really good story. JJ, he was now the COO of Orange Theory. JJ Cregan was presenting. He was on a panel at URSA. And I just walked up to him and introduced myself, was like, hey, I've heard we need to connect. We have a bunch of clients that we work with in Orange Theory. He was basically providing the vendor services for a lot of the franchisees. Me and him sat down and we kind of shared our vision around what we're doing. We don't just sell insurance, but there's all of these other services that club owners need access to. They need help with background checks. There's risk management policies and protocols that they need to implement. That's what we do. We help provide a risk assessment to all of the clubs. They take a 15-question survey. It gives them a risk assessment. That risk assessment allows us to understand what policies and protocols they need to implement, how they can go about mitigating that risk. And then, of course, we provide the insurance. But what's a great thing for anyone to have is to have visibility of risk for all clubs nationally. That's one of the things we started to do. We started to focus on ways we can support Orange Theory to provide a member benefit to their franchisees. We were the first insurance provider to support those kind of things.
So you started working with some of the franchisee groups, and then you stepped into work with the franchisor. Are you in a situation right now where you are looking for or can support individual franchisees? What is the size of the businesses that should be reaching out to you?
They vary. We have as small as one boutique club or Orange Theory Fitness to a private equity group that has over 100. So we're supporting all of the size of businesses in terms of private equity, or they're call it individually owned. They may own one or two. We're supporting at all levels. And I think that's probably the uniqueness around us, is that we are a tech business first. A lot of the small business aspect of our platform allows a small boutique organization to go in and get the same service in terms of visibility of risk, in terms of tools and resources, as a large organization would get. And we use technology to make that.
You just mentioned private equity, and you also mentioned being a tech-focused company. We know that private equity loves tech, and it seems like they love Players Health because you just got, what's the number, 60 million in fundraising?
Yeah, we closed, this is our Series C. It's a $60 million capital raise. It was led by Bluestone Equity Partners. They're a sports and entertainment-focused private equity group. But we've been at this for a while. We've raised over $100 million year to date for Players Health to create safe spaces for athletes to play sports. I never envisioned the business being this big, but you're right. The market sees what we're doing. They see the upside of what this could really be. That's reflective of the round.
Congratulations, first of all, because that's not just raising, but that's raising significant dollars. And secondarily, what are those dollars going to fuel? What is the next generation of Players Health going to look like?
Focused on growth. There's two aspects of our growth strategy. There's an inorganic growth strategy, so M&A. There are other organizations that call it look, walk, and talk like Players Health that may be significantly smaller, that would be a good 1 + 1 = 3. And then there's organic growth. I think there's so much opportunity and growth that's happening in sports, whether it be female sports going through the roof, whether it be new professional leagues that are coming online, whether it be NIL, changing college sports. We just see a huge opportunity for us to become the market leader. From youth to pro, we could be that market leader. So we'll be over 100 employees by the end of this quarter. Just to give you a sense, we were less than 60 before October. Lots of growth in terms of people. We just want to serve our people well. And so we just want to make sure that we have the right people in the right seats to scale and be there for them.
You're talking about growth and your own personal growth, the company's growth. And I think it's accommodating some of the growth that we're seeing in the space. And NIL would be one of the places where there's just extreme growth just because it's a brand new offering. If a large part of this audience is a fitness kind of industry audience who doesn't know a ton about NIL, give us the NIL 101.
The reason why we got into the NIL, and this will really backdoor into what is NIL. I was a college athlete. I had lost both my parents and I inherited all this money. So I was 19, hundreds of thousands of dollars in my account, and I didn't know what to do with it. I came from nothing. In the beginning, I made some pretty bonehead decisions, buying cars and a bunch of other stuff. But ultimately, I had some good people around me to make good decisions around that capital. And that money actually seeded Players Health. It wouldn't exist without that happening. When I started started looking at NIL. Here it is, for the first time in the history of collegiate sports, college athletes can now generate revenue on their name, image, and likeness. We're now in full pay-to-play mode now. It's gone beyond just name, image, and likeness. It used to be, call it illegal, for an athlete to get paid for an autograph. Now they can do that. They're not doing that in a small way. Athletes are signing multi-million-dollar contracts. And now we have what is called a rev share. So the settlement, the NCAA settlement, most likely will be fully passed in April. It's over a $2 billion settlement that will require all Power 4 NCAA schools to share up to 22% of their revenue with the athlete. So for the first time, the athletes have a seat at the table. They are now required to pay the athlete a portion of revenue that the athletic departments are generating. At Players Health, there's risk on both sides. The athlete now has an earning potential that they need to protect. Say I'm making $1 million this year and I'm a sophomore and I get hurt really bad and I'm out for the next 12 months. I'm not making $1 million next year. So they can buy a policy to ensure that next year's revenue. And then if the school pays $1 million to an athlete and that athlete gets hurt, well, that school can't claw that money back. We have a policy that would basically protect that $1 million that they're paying out to that athlete in the case of an injury. And so these are just a couple products that we provide to support and help with risk management in this space.
It's such a crazy time because we're recording this at about, a week after the national championship game where the most funded team won the national championship. No coincidence, right? It starts to be where it used to be kind of a hidden industry or a hidden business. It's now in your face, front and center. It is a money game at this point. I do agree that the athletes deserve a slice of that. I just think it's a fascinating time and it's a fascinating trend. The role that you're taking in educating a lot of the athletes around this game is critically important because, to your point, a 4-year-old game, no one on the professional side knows exactly how to navigate it, let alone the athletes. I think everything that you're doing to protect the athletes and make sure they know how to protect themselves is so critically important. If we switch our focus to the fitness industry or the wellness industry, are there trends that you're watching in fitness that kind of have piqued your interest at this point?
I wouldn't say that there's a ton of change happening. I just think there's just a lot more professionalization happening in the space. Private equity firms are really rolling into this space, and you're starting to see a lot of roll-ups, and they're wanting one-stop shop solutions for all of their resources because they now have buying power. So if I've aggregated a large number of clubs, then now I can negotiate for better prices on certain things. And so we see that that is happening and more in an increasing way. And I think we're also still rebounding from COVID. There are a lot of organizations, brands that have suffered coming out of COVID, and we're still in that rebounding point. So cost is still a very big factor for a lot of these organizations. So any way that they can save, they're going to be leaning in. And then any way in which we can help them protect their risk. Property happens to be a really tough spot right now because of forest fires and hurricanes and all of these other pieces. If you have a club in those areas, you're either getting non-renewed or your premiums are doubling. And so our focus has just been, how do we help save our organizations money, but also how do we help them get access to the scope of coverage they need if they are in those hot areas, basically.
And education around all those things. I mean, this is all happening in real time. You're talking about the fires out in California. That is a real-time impact on insurance renewals that, again, none of us common folk understand or know how to navigate. And so if you're a single club owner, if you're a boutique fitness owner that really has margins that are thin already because of COVID, now you kind of have this additional layer to get up to speed on really quickly. So I guess if you're listening and you're in a California kind of state, Florida, Texas is another area. There's a lot of hot spots in the country right now that are crazy for this issue. I want to kind of pivot to you as an entrepreneur because you've now been in this game for 10 years and you seem like a natural entrepreneur. Did you always feel like you were going to be an entrepreneur?
No way. I knew I wasn't going to have a regular job. I knew that from the get-go. I just didn't know what the next step would be. Of course, when you're 20-something playing pro ball, that's all you can think about. And then kind of the fairy tale ends and you got to get real. The natural path for me was entrepreneurship. It allowed me to be mission-led, mission-driven. Anything that I create always has to be good for the greater good. I'm always wanting to build businesses that do good and do well. I've made every mistake you could possibly make building a business. I knew nothing about business. I'm a kid from Chicago, playing football, and then I started this company. Every mistake you can make, I've made, and I think it's just resilience and staying with it and having a lot of passion for the vision that you have.
Do you feel like there's an overlap? You talk about resilience. You also just talked about your injuries as an athlete. You were an athlete. You broke bones. You came back. All of the things that you have to deal with as an athlete, I think, create this resilience. And do you feel like there's a natural professional evolution from athletics into entrepreneurship?
It doesn't feel natural, but I think the values and the motivations that you have as an athlete or the things that you learn definitely translate really well in terms of your ability to be able to handle adversity or someone telling you no. That's probably one of the biggest things in starting a business, talking to investors. You're going to get a ton of no's. Fortunately, I had to go to open tryouts, playing football and didn't make the team or getting cut from this team. You just kind of learn that along the way. But I think there's also a bent around excellence that really translates into business really well, and that athletes are all about wanting to get it right. Once they understand kind of what they're doing, they want to be the best at it. So there's a huge competitive nature to it. I think similar to being an athlete, business allows you to operate in your own brand. You think about all the professional athletes that we know about. They were able to operate as individuals, compete, and to build their brand. In business, you can have your company, but we know about Elon Musk and Tesla because he has his own brand. And Tesla's is out crushing it because he can be an individual. That's one thing I love, in that I can be who I am and bring all of myself into my business. It's something that I always value.
I think that's critically important too. And I think it starts going back into NIL deals. If you're successful with your NIL deals, you can have a known personal brand coming out of school and you can build whatever business on top of it. Clothing, supplements.
The foundation that these athletes have, or the potential foundation that they have, is unprecedented. Just think, you're 21, you have no college debt, and you've made $1 million in college playing sports, and you're going into the workforce. Say you don't play pro. Say you don't even get to the NFL, the NBA, but you've made $1 million in college sports and you're going into the workforce with that kind of money. The choices that you have, it's endless.
You came before the NIL time, but you had the benefit of like a little seed money that got you started. Imagine if you had NIL money, you'd be really off to the races at this point. When you think back to like having that seed money, what were the steps between like realizing like I have enough to start something and then starting Players Health? What helped you bridge that gap or gave you the confidence to like go after this vision?
This is not something I would recommend for anyone, but this kind of been how I go about doing things. I always put myself in a position where failure is not an option. I don't wade into the water, I jump all the way in. And I've done that with everything that I've done, because once I'm in, I've put my chips in, I can't go back. And so I always put myself in a position where going back is not an option and I actually have to progress forward. That was the disposition I had when I finished playing. I had this little money. I was playing for the Saskatchewan Roughriders. I just tore my hamstring. I thought they were going to cut me, but they didn't. Then I went to visit one of my buddies, and he played for the New York Giants at the time. Spent the weekend with them, went to a game, all this stuff. And I just knew, all right, I'm done. I called my agent, was like, hey, I'm done. I'm not going to come back. And he's trying to convince me to come back. And I'm like, I want to start this company, X, Y, and Z. And so he was like, man, what is this company about? Tell me about it. So I tell him about the company. He was like, man, I think that's a really good idea. I was like, man, I got a little money saved up. I'm about to go in on it. He matched me dollar for dollar what I put in. That's how I got going. So I had someone else also that believed in me, that saw my work ethic, that also gave me a little bit of validation more for me to go out and, take the risk.
Is he still involved in your business today?
Yeah, he's still an investor. Yeah.
That's really cool. I think as entrepreneurs, belief is one of the core foundational pieces that you need, whether it's imposter syndrome or whether it's just being a young entrepreneur and you just don't know. It's so hard to hold on to that belief of like, yes, I can get this across the finish line. And so that's amazing that you had early support in that regard that was kind of saying this could be a thing.
We often forget that everything started small. Any business that we've seen that's massive today started in a garage somewhere or started off the corner of someone's desk. So we all got to start. It's just, can you weather the storm? Can you iterate? Can you survive the no's? Can you max out your credit cards, or like whatever you got to do to see your vision and that original dream come to life? You'll get validation along the way, and you just cling to those good moments, and that'll kind of take you through some of the bad moments you'll have.
So you're 10 years into entrepreneurship now. What's your favorite aspect of entrepreneurship?
People. I love developing people. My role at Players Health, I'm hyper focused around making sure that Players Health doesn't feel like a job. and that people aren't just trying to clock in and clock out, but they're coming here to become the very best version of themselves. When anyone that starts at Players Health, everyone has to develop their own mission statement. So regardless of where you are in your career, whether you're a 20-something-year-old coming out of college, or whether you've been 20 years in the industry, everyone has to develop their own mission statement. And this is something that we hold everyone accountable to. Every week we check in on it, on their mission, and whether you on mission or off. And it's really just helping everyone. There's some people that maybe for the first time, they're now realizing, like, what am I on this earth for? What am I supposed to be doing? And it's not just like peddling policies. This company is a mission-driven organization around creating safe spaces for athletes to play the sport that they love. Is that something you want to get behind? And does your mission align with that? And so I'm just adamant about making sure that people, one, find their gift, because we all have a gift. And then I want people to live in that gift as consistent and as often as possible.
So your organization is 100 people now. How do you keep elements of entrepreneurship flowing through your organization? Secondly, how do you have 100 different personal missions happening and have them all align into one path?
That's a really, really good question. I think from an entrepreneurial perspective, I think one of the things that I'm always communicating to our team is that, one, we have to have the courage to grow, and growth requires change. One of the biggest things is that we focus on growing the business. Growth is not an option, because if you're not growing, you're dying. And so we are constantly focused on growth. As uncomfortable as growth is, because it requires us to change, that is our bent. We're going to focus on growing. I think secondly, in terms of making sure that all 100 people are aligned, is that we have our core values. And our core values in Players Health, and every company has their core values, but we hire, fire, and retain based on these core values. So if you were going through the interviewing process for a role here at Players Health, we're going to score you based on those core values. As we're getting to know you, are you mission driven? Do you go beyond? Do you have integrity? These are core values that we have, and do you display that? And you have to be at an 80% or better for you to become a finalist. By the time you've gotten to the point where you're an employee here at Players Health, we know you're aligned in terms of what we want to do and where we want to go. And now your mission is you discovering your role, your part to play, and us doing what we say we're going to do.
It's really cool. It's like you're asking people to build their mission statement, but you're almost identifying these people or interviewing these people to ensure that their value system is already a match. Let's assume that their mission statement, while it might be 3 degrees to the left or 3 degrees to the right, it's going to be somewhere in the lane of what we play in because they're a core values match.
Definitely.
That's fascinating. I love that way of hiring, retaining, and firing talent. I think that's great. That will help you as you go from 100 to 200 to keep your culture consistent.
Yeah, and I think it's really important as the company is growing quickly. Early days Players Health, we went from 12 people to 76 people in the matter of like 9 to 10 months. There's a lot of growth, and systems are breaking all over the place. When you're growing, and we just talked about that discomfort and changing, you really understand who people really are when you're in the growth stage, because you're going to be stressed. And everyone says they want to grow, but growth requires you to change, and you are not going to be comfortable the whole way. We just want to make sure that we have the people that are in the boat with us. We know that they want the same thing we want, and their own personal mission is aligning with it. So when it does get tough, we're all going to have that extra level of passion to keep it going. Right?
Everyone says they want to work in a startup until they actually work in a startup.
I used to hear founders go like, hey, it's harder to scale a business than it is to build one. And I used to go like, that's easy for you to say. Like, you already have a big company. I now know exactly what they're saying, because as you scale, every plateau that the business grows, the system breaks. What got you here is not going to get you here. So everything has to change to get you here, but it never stops. Like, you're just consistently changing and growing and evolving. The business becomes truly a life of its own.
Is there any advice that you wish someone would have shared with you at the beginning of this journey, like 10 years ago, like that someone would have shared this cheat code with you to help you skip a step or make all of this easier?
I'm happy you asked that. Probably the biggest advice, and I share this with founders all the time, your dream for your business, like that original dream, you're not going to be able to find any external like blueprint for making that dream a reality. When I first had this idea, I was always trying to find external validation to figure out whether I was on the right track or not. Well, Players Health is a one-of-one. Like, we are different. Regardless, you can be in the same field, you can be selling the same product, but because you're the leader, that business is different. And so you have to look within yourself to find the motivation. You have to trust your vision for the business before you look for everyone else. They're doing it. Maybe we should just do that. You have to find your own way to make things happen. And then, of course, you listen to wise advice and all of these other things. But the true essence of your business is going to come from you. And I wish someone would have told me, like, quit trying to copy what everyone else is doing. Actually use intuition and use your best judgment for what you want to build, and build that, and then iterate and learn, make mistakes, and do the process, because the process is something you can't avoid.
Have there been moments where you've looked internal for that validation of, yeah, I'm on the right path, I just got to keep going, and you questioned yourself?
All the time. Yeah, every time. There was times I'm like, all right, am I crazy? Because at one point, I almost sold this business for like $375K. And this was like 6-7 years ago. And everybody was like, just sail, Ty. Like, you had a good try. And when everyone's telling you that, you're like, what about you that says you should keep going? And I think it comes down to like faith, and not in a spiritual sense, but it's truly faith. I believe that this business could be what I dream it could be. I just got to survive. And that was the mindset that I had. There are so many moments where I was like, all right, I think I should hang it up, or I want to do this, but no one around me is doing it. Should we do it? And I think that's the courage of being an entrepreneur. It's not like you're not going to be fearful. You're going to have fear. You actually have to do the thing that you fear the most. If you continue to keep doing that, you're going to have so many breakthroughs throughout your career, because the things that you're fearful of, everyone else was as well. That's why no one has done it. So you have to be the first.
Do the thing you fear the most. I like that. You talked moments ago about your process, or you have to like trust your process, or you have to like stay in your process. Are there pieces of your process that, let's say you're having one of those moments where you're not believing or you're kind of questioning, are there components of your process that bring you back to center? Like, okay, I just got to knock out this, this, and this.
Well, one of the things that in my mind works a little differently in that, say I'm going to make a business change, or I'm thinking about going into a new market. I have to be able to understand it micro to macro to micro again. So all of the pieces of the value chain. And I study value chain. So I love the value chain of an industry. So the value chain of an insurance could be insurance company or carrier, broker, underwriting, claims. Like, I want to understand, how do you go from the product to cash to delivering it, the whole thing. Once I understand that, then I do market analysis. How is everyone supporting the value chain? Who's really good at this part of the value chain? Who's really good at that part of the value chain? And I want to understand who's really differentiated by actually outperforming in those areas. And then I'm looking at how big the opportunity is. And then I'm spending a ton of time with customers. How are they experiencing the value chain being implemented? What gravitates them towards a certain thing? Once I have all those pieces, that's when I trust what I know about the industry, how the value chain is being supported, and what the upside is. And really, you got to go for it and go big.
It's like an information collection kind of process almost. Do you feel like information collection de-risks things in your mind?
I'd say yes, they definitely de-risk. It helps you put together a plan, or it can help you actually think about what the worst thing could happen. And so unless you have all those pieces, what if these three things don't happen? Then what? And so it allows you to be able to play that game a little bit. But you're never going to be able to have zero risk whenever you make any move, especially if it hasn't been done before. Like when we started our business, had we started insurance first, we wouldn't be where we are. Because one of the things we recognize is that insurance companies, they're making a lot of money. The broker doesn't get paid to implement risk management. They get paid to sell insurance. And so our value proposition is that the more organizations engage in risk management, the cheaper their insurance becomes. Insurance companies don't think that way. And so I recognize that we started as a risk management focusing on safety first. And that happened to be the unlock for us to understand the risk, for being able to price it better, to be able to provide better solutions to our organizations. And then we didn't just give them a product and say, good luck. We actually said, we're going to lean in with you, help you become a better risk. And then we're going to give you mechanisms to make your insurance cheaper. If you do these things, here's your 10% credit. That was a massive unlock. No one had done that before. And of course, organizations were doing it in like our car insurance and stuff. But within our industry, we had not seen that before.
Yeah, it's really fascinating. If you weren't building for Players Health, what would you be doing?
That's a really good question. Yeah, I'd be in ministry. I'd still be dealing with people, leading people.
That's cool. I feel like there's a way to merge those two worlds, especially as you're in NIL land and trying to really truly preach to these athletes. Here's how to set yourself up for success, either as an entrepreneur going forward or just in life going forward. I could see there's something there. There's a YouTube channel out there for you.
I'm going to definitely take that as advice for sure.
So we are recording this in January. We're in resolution season. Did you set any 2025 resolutions or goals?
Yeah, I'm really big on goals. I put together a vision board every year. I've done it for the past 5, 6 years, and they hit on multiple facets of my life. So there's health focus, there's family, there's relationship with my wife, there's finances, like all of these things. And so I've highlighted, call like a rule of life that I've identified and put together to help me stay on track. Probably one of the biggest differences I had this year with resolutions that I wasn't so focused on the outcome. I was just focusing on input. So if I do these things, this outcome is inevitable. So I just focus on, all right, if I work out 4 days a week at a minimum, then the outcome I want is X. If I'm only eating these things, then my outcome is inevitable. So I spent most of my time when I put together my rule of life this year was around input.
Is the rule of life somewhat like a set of core values, or do you reduce it down to one phrase? How do you create your rule of life?
It's highlighting specific parts of my life. It's how I want to show up. So the first thing, it starts with my roles. What roles do I occupy? I actually just wrote something about this. In our lives, things can get really chaotic where we're building businesses, we got families, like we're doing all this stuff. If you don't have a right priority, if you don't have a set of rules that you occupy, I think there's a misconception to think that freedom is no rules. I've learned that the more structure I have, the more freedom that I have to operate in. Without structure, it's chaos. And so I've developed a set of rules around how often I'm going to take my wife out to dinner. That's a rule that I set that, hey, we're going to go at least once a week. If it's just coffee, we're going to go and have a little date night. That's something we're going to do. So that's a rule that I'm going to follow. And without that, I can go 3-4 months and we don't even sit down and eat. So these are just rules that I've set up that, hey, if I have this input, the output is we're going to meet often. We're not going to go a whole quarter and we haven't had dinner and kids are driving us crazy and careers and all of this other stuff. I've broken it down with my roles. So the 5 people that I'm going to focus on investing in relationships this year. Once you have more than 5 types of relationships and people, it can get really chaotic. It's hard to manage, especially when you're an entrepreneur, business builder. Your health, money, like how you manage money, how are you going to spend? Are you going to stick to a budget? These are rules I've outlined. And I've never done that before. This is my first year doing it. Maybe we do a recap and I can share how it went.
I love it. I think I'm maybe in the same evolution as you are, where I used to have destination based goals. And then I realized that like once you hit the destination, then what? And you
Right.
have this like come down moment. If you instead attach your goals to your processes, or in your case, you call them rules, if you go process based goals, the destination could be even better than you've ever imagined it would be. I love how open that puts the playing field, especially as an entrepreneur, because it really detaches you from any kind of strict, it must look like this in order to be successful. It could evolve, it could pivot, it could go in any different direction. But as long as you're following your rules, you kind of are staying true to what you're trying to build. It's interesting. We'll put that on your YouTube channel when you get it started.
Definitely. That happened to me 2 years ago. I had all of these outcomes or destinations. I love how you describe that. In 1 year, everything that I've ever wanted, I had. Like every accolade, entrepreneur of the year, all the house, the cars, like all of it happened in 1 year. And then I was like, well, now what? 35 years old, it is pretty jarring. But if you have it more open-ended and it's input-based, you're right. The sky's the limit.
I want to ask you about some fails, and maybe you had a setback season, whether it was in players' health or whether it was in your athletic career before that. How did you navigate your setback season to flip the script and kind of move into a comeback season?
I've learned to really value and cherish every failure that I've had. I've never learned from the success. Successes are great to celebrate, but all of the failures that I've had, I think one of the things I recognize is that every perceived failure at that time ultimately wasn't a failure. One of the things I don't do is whenever something that maybe I thought was going to happen or I hoped would happen or it didn't happen, I don't get too low about it because I don't have the complete picture. And I'll give an example. This was 5-6 years ago, right before I was about to sell the company for $375K. There was an investor that I was doing a capital raise with. And this is at a point in the Players Health history where we were desperate for capital, really desperate. I was about to make a really bad decision. I was about to sell almost 50% of the business for $1.5 million. It was just a bad deal. But I didn't know anything. I didn't know any better. I'm just out here capital raising. The deal at the 11th hour fell through. The investor pulled out, and like the initial shock was like, what am I going to do? And then my whole team quit right after that, except my co-founder. The day after the shock wore off, we posted this video. I still have it. And it was just like, hey, this just happened. We're going to make it through this. We're going to mark this as a moment that we're going to come out of this. That deal fell through. And I'll tell you exactly the complete picture. Probably about 2 months later, we're low. Like we have no cash in the bank. Like we're just surviving. My wife's driving Uber. We're just trying to survive basically. And I'm like, we're about to get a breakthrough. I just feel it. And this is why you can't get too low. I get this letter in the mail. And this is now, my mom had been passed over 10 years now at this point. There was this letter and it was from an insurance company. My wife calls it and they won't talk to her because it's not me. I'm the beneficiary XYZ. So I call. At the time my mom passed, this insurance company got bought by another insurance company and they did not pay out the death benefit. It was 140 grand out of nowhere. We paid off some debt. And then I went back, I talked to my wife. I was like, we got to put it into the business. And once that happened, I stopped worrying about those moments, those lulls. I started to embrace them as like, how could I learn from it? How is this going to continue to make me stronger? And now I love them. Like I love those moments because I'm going to grow. It's not the end of the world, as much as it may seem like it at the moment.
It's such a good lesson for anyone in entrepreneurship or just in life in general. We've covered a lot of ground. Is there anything else that's top of mind with you that you want to put your ministry hat on and riff on for a few moments?
I actually just wrote something about this and around how do we build relationships in business. I think the more and more that I've gotten closer to God and just reading my word and just really leaning into those aspects of my life, I now know what a real relationship is. In business, our relationships have become so transactional because it's all about what we want to get. What I've learned as we've continued to build Players Health is that when we lean into real relationships in business, lives could truly change. The culture that we have at this company has just been amazing, all because we took the time to just get to know each other. Every week we have all hands and one person has to present for 15 minutes about their life. This is not a performance. They're just there saying, this is who I am. This is how I came to be. This is how I landed here at Players Health. We had an employee basically say this is the first time in over 30 years that anyone at work has ever asked her who she was and her story. It broke my heart, one, but it also helped me understand that like our relationships in business, because we spend so much time with each other, there's a massive opportunity for us to unlock connections and real relationships just by being curious about who that person is, their life, their mission, what do they want to do with their lives, and how can we help each other do that? That's my dream. That's my focus at Players Health, is really to help people develop and grow, that they don't just see this company as a job, but it's more of a calling. We're living life together. And I want to help each and every person that works with me live the very best life that they can live.
And that it's not transactional.
It's transformational.
And I think when you switch your mindset from what can you do for me to like, what can I do for you? That's where it starts to get fun, because all of a sudden you're building things together as opposed to just looking to take. So that being said, is there something that you're working on right now that you need help on? Do you want to put any sort of ask out into the world?
Well, we are hiring. So honestly, we are looking for really good people. We have tons of roles that are active and open. We're looking for people that want to go out and make a difference in the world through their work. I love work, and it's our contribution to society when we show up to work. That's one of the big ways. And then also, we are always looking to partner and work with fitness clubs and organizations that, one, want to provide a better value add for their members in the way of risk management and safety. And so if that is something that you lean into or you need help or have questions around, we love to lean in there too.
Well, I will link the careers page to Players Health as well as the main website to Players Health into the show notes. So if you are somebody who's looking to join a great company. I'll share that link in the show notes. And if you are a health club operator or a boutique fitness club operator, and this is at all interesting, check out his website. Some really cool stuff going on. Tyrre, thank you so much for everything that you're doing in the athletic space and to protect athletes. I think it's so important. And thank you so much for sharing everything that you did with us today on the Society Pod.
Thank you. Really appreciate you having me.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of the Society Pod.